Trump launched what seemed like a perfect ambush against Obama in the East Room, but Obama's response landed with surgical precision that left Trump defending ground he thought he owned. Barack Obama failed. We're cleaning up his mess. The words cut through the afternoon air as President Donald Trump gripped the podium in the White House East Room, his finger stabbing forward with each syllable. The cameras locked onto him instantly, their mechanical whir almost drowned out by the sudden shift in the room's energy. Reporters straightened in their seats. Some scribbled frantically across their notepads. Others exchanged knowing glances. They all sensed this moment would echo far beyond these walls. It was a sweltering Washington afternoon, and the press conference was meant to spotlight infrastructure spending, roads, bridges, transit systems. But Trump, as he often did, veered into familiar territory. The temperature in the room seemed to drop the instant Obama's name left his lips. You examine the numbers, you study the deals, disasters, Trump declared, his hand cutting through the air like he was swatting away invisible critics. Obama abandoned this country in shambles. He made us vulnerable, and now we're rebuilding. My administration is rebuilding it. Nobody else could have done this. The camera shutters fired in rapid succession. CNN's Jim Acosta caught NBC's Kristen Welker's eye across the room, both recognizing they weren't witnessing casual political theater. This wasn't Trump's usual riffing about poll numbers or jabbing at distant rivals. This was him standing before the entire nation, attempting to rewrite 8 years of history in real time. A reporter's voice pierced the tension. Mr. President, are you directly blaming former President Obama for America's current infrastructure challenges? Trump leaned into the microphone, his expression hardening. Absolutely. 100%. He couldn't get anything done. 8 years, nothing substantial. He left America trailing behind folks, and now we're playing catch-up. The room fell into that peculiar kind of silence that isn't really quiet at all, the kind pregnant with anticipation. You could hear the subtle whir of a camera lens autofocusing, the faint clearing of a throat from the back row. Then, predictably, Trump pressed forward. Look, Barack Obama excelled at one thing: talking. Really polished speeches, beautiful words, lots of eloquent phrases. But when it came to execution, nothing. My administration, this administration, is about results. We're rebuilding, we're winning. Some reporters scribbled harder, their pens racing across paper. Others wore knowing smirks, understanding exactly what was unfolding. This had stopped being about infrastructure the moment Trump's tone sharpened. This was about legacy, about Trump positioning himself as the solution to Obama's supposed failures. Across the country, you could almost feel televisions flickering to life. Living rooms in Phoenix, diners in Des Moines, office break rooms in Tampa, all tuning in. For Trump's base, this was red meat. For his critics, it was another unprovoked assault on a man many still revered. Either way, everyone understood. Obama wouldn't remain silent for long. By the time Trump concluded his remarks, the internet was already blazing. Video clips were being sliced and shared, hashtags were trending upward, and cable news producers were assembling their evening panels. A San Diego outlet captured the national mood with a headline that read, "Trump targets Obama for nation's problems." Again. Back at the White House, aides moved with urgent purpose. Some attempted to reframe the remarks, emphasizing Trump's commitment to America's infrastructure renewal. Others, speaking privately behind closed doors, admitted the president had just ignited a fuse that might detonate in his face. Because unlike many of Trump's political targets, Obama retained something unique: the ability to respond with devastating effectiveness. And when he chose to speak, people listened. Across town in a quiet Georgetown office, a former Obama aide scrolled through the clips on her phone. She shook her head and muttered under her breath, "Here he goes again." She knew her former boss well enough to predict what was coming. Barack Obama rarely rushed into responses, but when he chose to engage, he made every word count. Trump, meanwhile, appeared unfazed. After the press conference, he strode from the East Room with his characteristic confidence. chatting casually with staffers as though he hadn't just launched a public assault on his predecessor. Cameras trailed him until the doors sealed shut, but the weight of his accusations lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. In households across America, conversations ignited immediately. A retired teacher in Spokane set down her coffee mug and shook her head. "That man can't go 7 days without dragging Obama's name through the mud," she told her husband. In a Dallas barbershop, a group of men debated whether Trump's infrastructure criticism held water. And across countless social media feeds, the clips looped endlessly, sparking heated arguments in comment sections that would burn well into the night. What Trump couldn't have anticipated, what he couldn't have predicted, was how swiftly his political jab would ricochet back. Because while he was busy attacking, Obama's team was already crafting a response that would completely shift the narrative. But before we witness Obama's masterful counter-move, the world needed to see how Trump's words rippled through the media, landscape, and public consciousness, setting the stage for a confrontation no one could ignore. Within hours of Trump's press conference, the nation was electric with reaction. Television studios from Los Angeles to Miami scrambled to edit their footage, producers barking orders to get segments on air before their competitors could react. By evening news time, nearly every major network was leading with the same story. Trump had targeted Obama, and he hadn't pulled any punches. On CNN, Anderson Cooper replayed the clip repeatedly. Former President Obama left America weaker. Trump's voice echoing while his finger jabbed through the air in slow motion. Cooper tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing as he addressed his panel. Is this legitimate political critique or calculated theater? Across the dial, Fox News took a markedly different approach. Sean Hannity praised Trump for speaking truth to power, replaying identical footage with a banner reading, "Trump exposes Obama's failed legacy." During a split-screen debate, one guest called it overdue honesty, while another argued it was an obsession that distracts from governing. In living rooms nationwide, viewers argued back at their televisions. Some nodded along with Trump, convinced he was right that Obama had overpromised and underdelivered. Others groaned in frustration that the current president couldn't stop, dragging his predecessor into the spotlight. Social media platforms ignited even faster. On Twitter, Obama vs. Trump rocketed into the top 5 trends. A viral tweet from a Detroit college student read, "Trump blames Obama for everything. Next, he'll claim Obama invented potholes." That single post accumulated hundreds of thousands of likes and retweets within hours. Meanwhile, a retired veteran in Florida tweeted support for Trump. "He's absolutely right. Obama weakened our military. Trump's rebuilding it." But this jab felt different from previous attacks. Maybe it was the sharpness in Trump's delivery, or perhaps it was how he singled Obama out without hesitation. Whatever the catalyst, people were waiting, almost daring Obama to respond. In Philadelphia, university students huddled around a laptop in their dorm room. One, sipping from a soda can, said, "If Obama fires back, it's game over." His roommate grinned. "Yeah, but will he? He usually stays above the fray." Meanwhile, pundits speculated endlessly. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow pulled up data on infrastructure spending, demonstrating that much of Trump's claim was factually questionable. She paused dramatically and looked directly into the camera. What's fascinating here isn't the accuracy. It's the audacity. Trump is attempting to rewrite history, and Obama has the power to correct the record. Late-night comedians sensed blood in the water. On The Late Show, Stephen Colbert opened with, "Today, Trump accused Obama of ruining infrastructure. Next, he'll blame him for that pothole on I-95. The audience roared, but beneath the laughter, people recognized the deeper conflict brewing. Behind the scenes, journalists worked their phones frantically. An editor at the Washington Post instructed a reporter to reach out to Obama's office for comment. At the Los Angeles Times, staff debated whether Obama would dignify Trump's words with a response. But deep down, they suspected he would. At a small cafe in Madison, Wisconsin, a couple in their 60s discussed the situation over pie and coffee. "You know," the man said, stirring cream into his mug, Obama doesn't need to get angry. All he has to do is present the facts and Trump will look foolish. His wife nodded slowly. That's why people still respect him. He doesn't shout, he explains. By late evening, cable news screens filled with panels of experts debating whether Trump had overplayed his hand. The conversation had shifted away from infrastructure entirely. Now it was about credibility, about whose voice carried more weight in America, the sitting president with his bold claims, or the former president whose composed demeanor often disarmed critics. One political analyst on PBS compared it to a man running into a thunderstorm without an umbrella. His co-host added, if Obama responds, the contrast will be stark. Trump thrives on chaos. Obama thrives on precision. It's not an even match. And in living rooms, bars, and break rooms, ordinary Americans waited. They didn't just want Obama to respond. They expected him to. After all, this wasn't Trump's first attack, but it felt like this time, Obama might finally strike back. The stage was set. Trump had thrown the opening punch, and America was holding its breath to see if Obama would counter. But when Obama finally broke his silence, it wasn't a punch at all. It was something sharper, calmer, and far more devastating. Response didn't arrive immediately. That was the first thing people noticed. Hours passed while cable networks looped Trump's soundbite endlessly, yet Obama's team remained silent. No tweets, no press releases, no strategic leaks to reporters, just silence. And that silence, in its own way, became part of the story. But by mid-morning the following day, the response landed. Barack Obama didn't step before cameras or hold a rally. He didn't insult, mock, or return fire with equal heat. Instead, his office released a 3-page statement, calm, measured, and loaded with verifiable facts. The release hit newsroom inboxes across the country at exactly 10:14 a.m. Within minutes, it was being read aloud on live television. President Obama is proud of the progress achieved during his administration, the statement began. From the largest infrastructure investment since the Eisenhower era to bipartisan efforts that modernized America's roads and bridges, the record speaks for itself. Anchors leaned forward as the statement grew more specific. The Recovery Act of 2009 provided $48 billion for transportation projects, including improvements to over 40,000 miles of roads and nearly 2,700 bridges. Independent studies and bipartisan commissions have confirmed that the foundation established during those years enabled the work of subsequent administrations. Obama's words didn't just rebut Trump's claims, they dismantled them methodically. Rather than accusing, he cited sources. Instead of raising his voice, he lowered the temperature. In doing so, he reminded Americans of something many had forgotten: his ability to control a room without even being in it. On MSNBC, a producer whispered off camera as the statement scrolled across the teleprompter, "He's cutting Trump down without even mentioning his name directly." In Atlanta, an Uber driver had the radio tuned to a local station reading excerpts aloud. His passenger, a middle-aged woman carrying groceries, smiled faintly. "That's Obama," she said. "Cool, calm, facts over. Moise." But the statement wasn't purely numbers and policy. Obama slipped in a subtle sting, the kind that doesn't land until you hear it twice. Leadership is not measured by how loudly one speaks or how often one points fingers. It is measured by the ability to unite, to listen, and to act with clarity. Those words cut deeper than any insult could have. Social media exploded. One tweet from a high school teacher in Cleveland read, "Obama didn't even need to shout. He just reminded us what leadership sounds like." The tweet collected thousands of retweets within hours. At the White House, the reaction was swift and panicked. Inside the West Wing, staffers huddled around televisions. One aide muttered, "This is bad, really bad." Another leaned against the wall, arms folded, staring at the floor. For all the chaos of Trump's press conferences, Obama's steady hand had once again managed to shift the focus without raising his voice. Meanwhile, journalists pounced. The New York Times published a side-by-side comparison of Trump's claims versus Obama's documented achievements. The headline read, "Trump's blame meets Obama's receipts." Over at Politico, a columnist wrote, "Obama just reminded the country that leadership is as much about tone as it is about results. Even late-night comedy turned serious momentarily." Trevor Noah looked directly into the camera and said, "Trump shouted, Obama explained." And once again, facts proved louder than noise. The audience applauded not just the joke, but the truth behind it. What really set the response apart wasn't just the content, it was the restraint. Obama could have hammered Trump on any number of fronts: COVID mishandling, chaotic staffing, international blunders. Instead, he stayed narrowly focused, which made the statement even more powerful. Like a boxer throwing one precise jab that connects perfectly rather than swinging wildly. In Springfield, Missouri, a local community organizer gathered with a small group at a coffee shop. They watched coverage on a muted TV while reading the statement on their phones. "This is the difference," she told her friend. "Trump thrives on anger. Obama thrives on patience. That's why his words hit harder. They last. And last they did." By the evening news cycle, Obama's response had already overshadowed Trump's attack. Clips of Trump's angry finger-pointing now ran alongside Obama's calm, steady paragraphs. The contrast was impossible to ignore. A CNN anchor summed it up during a panel discussion. "Trump gave us sound and fury. Obama gave us receipts and reflection. Which one do you think Americans will remember tomorrow?" But the story didn't end there. The moment those two narratives collided, the internet and media created a split-screen showdown that only magnified the difference between the two men. By the next morning, television screens across America had become a constant split-screen battlefield. Trump on one side, Obama on the other. On CNN, the clip of Trump jabbing his finger at reporters looped alongside a clean graphic of Obama's statement being read aloud. The juxtaposition was brutal. Trump looked fiery, animated, and frustrated. Obama's words, by contrast, were calm, organized, and filled with specifics. It wasn't just cable news channels. Local networks in cities like St. Louis, Albuquerque, and Portland were playing the clips back to back, giving viewers a direct comparison. The result was exactly what Obama's team expected. People could draw their own conclusions, and most did, en masse. Social media, the edits became almost theatrical. TikTok users layered dramatic music under Trump's rant, then switched to serene piano when Obama's statement appeared. A viral YouTube video titled "Trump versus Obama, Words versus Facts" racked up over 1 million views in just 2 days. The top comment read, "One man yells, the other man explains. The difference is night and day." But what made the contrast so powerful wasn't just style, it was substance. In town halls and radio interviews, experts broke it down for everyday people. On NPR, a host asked a transportation analyst to fact-check Obama's claims. The analyst confirmed nearly every number. Yes, those projects funded under the Recovery Act were real. They're still in use today: highways, bridges, rail upgrades. The data is clear. Meanwhile, Trump's statement had less to stand on. In fact, some of his own former staff contradicted his remarks. A clip resurfaced of one of Trump's earlier transportation secretaries, praising the Obama-era investments, undercutting the president's new narrative. That clip made its way onto MSNBC's Morning Joe, where the hosts leaned back in their chairs and chuckled. "He walked right into this," Joe Scarborough said. For everyday Americans, the side-by-side comparisons had emotional punch. A retired nurse in Tulsa told a local reporter, "When I see Trump yelling, I get tired. When I hear Obama's words, I feel like someone's thinking clearly." That sentiment echoed across Facebook posts and dinner table conversations, where people weren't just weighing policies but personalities. Obama's statement even gained traction with younger audiences who hadn't paid much attention to infrastructure debates before. A college sophomore in Boise stitched the two clips together on TikTok with the caption, "Leadership isn't volume, it's clarity." It was shared tens of thousands of times, spreading the message beyond politics into everyday cultural chatter, but not everyone was amused. Trump's allies scrambled to counter the comparisons. On Fox and Friends, one host insisted, "This is unfair editing. President Trump is a fighter. He speaks directly to the American people, not through polished statements." Yet even as they defended him, the optics were undeniable. The louder Trump got, the more Obama's composure stood out. By Wednesday afternoon, late-night comedy shows amplified the split-screen phenomenon. Jimmy Kimmel played Trump's clip, then cut to Obama's statement read in his own voice. Kimmel paused, raised his eyebrows, and deadpanned, "One of these guys sounds like a president." The audience erupted. The laughter wasn't just about the joke, it was about the stark difference people felt in their bones. In Phoenix, a group of union workers gathered at a break site, phones in hand. One of them held up the clips and said, "You can tell who's working with facts and who's working with feelings." His buddy shrugged. "Yeah, but feelings don't build bridges." The group chuckled, but the point lingered. Obama's numbers gave the sense of solid ground, while Trump's outbursts felt like quicksand, and the media knew a story when it saw one. The Associated Press ran a headline that read, "Side by Side, Obama's steady words versus Trump's fiery attack." The piece opened with, "In American politics, contrast is everything," and this week, contrast spoke louder than claims. By now, the comparisons had become impossible to escape. Whether you were in a diner in Omaha or waiting for a flight in Phoenix, the TVs overhead looped the same clips. People didn't even need to hear the sound. Just the body language alone told the story. Trump with his hand cutting through the air. Obama's words printed neatly on the screen. The effect was cumulative. Each replay, each meme, each late-night joke, and each local headline hammered home the same message. Obama looked steady, Trump looked rattled. And once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. But behind the polished edits and public chatter, there was another story playing out. The chaos inside Trump's own team as they scrambled to control the fallout. The sewer cameras had gone dark, but inside the West Wing, the firestorm was still raging. The morning after Obama's statement circulated, Trump's senior staff gathered in the Roosevelt Room. Phones buzzed on the table, each lighting up with new headlines. Tweets and late-night comedy clips replaying the split-screen comparisons. The mood was tense and the silence spoke volumes. Finally, White House Press Secretary Linda Harrington broke it. She tossed her phone onto the table, screen still glowing. "We're getting slaughtered out there," she said, her voice sharp. "Every network is running Obama's statement like it's gospel. He didn't even show his face, and he's already winning." Across the table, Chief of Staff Mark Reynolds leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "We knew he'd respond. We just didn't expect him to go full accountant on us. Every number he dropped checked out. That's what's killing us. It's not his tone. It's the receipts." Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, flipped through a folder of talking points. "We can pivot. We shift the focus back to the future, emphasize what we're doing now, not what he says happened before. The president needs to be on offense, not defense." But Kellyanne Conway, seated at the corner of the table, wasn't convinced. She tapped her pen against her notebook and said, "We've tried pivoting before. The problem is he won't let go. He keeps circling back to Obama. It's personal for him, and when it's personal, it shows." The room went quiet again because she was right. Trump's fixation on Obama wasn't just political strategy. It was something deeper, an obsession he couldn't drop. And the more he leaned into it, the easier it became for Obama to take the higher ground. A communications aide slid her laptop forward. On the screen was a viral meme making rounds on Twitter. A split-screen photo of Trump shouting at a podium next to Obama calmly sipping water. The caption read, "Noise versus poise." It already had 500,000 likes. "That's what people are seeing," the aide said. "And the more they see it, the more it sticks." Trump stormed into the room mid-conversation. The chatter died instantly. He was wearing his usual navy suit, red tie slightly off-center, and he looked agitated. "What's this I'm hearing about Obama making me look bad?" He barked. Fake news, total fake news. We're winning. You've seen the rallies. People love what we're doing. Harrington tried to steady her tone. Mr. President, it's not just the rallies. The comparisons are everywhere. Networks are showing his statement against your press conference. The contrast. Trump cut her off, waving his hand. Yeah, contrast. They love him. They've always loved him. Doesn't matter what he says. I could cure cancer and they'd still say, but what about Obama? His voice climbed with each word until it filled the room. Reynolds leaned forward carefully. Sir, the point isn't that they love him. The point is that people notice the difference. He's calm. You're passionate. That's not always in our favor. Trump glared at him, eyes narrowing. Passionate is good. People want strong. They don't want weak. Obama was weak. I'm strong. The room froze for a moment. No one dared contradict him, but beneath the silence, the truth was clear. Obama's restraint had boxed Trump in. Every attempt to attack looked more like noise. Every rebuttal from Obama looked more like leadership. Later that afternoon, Harrington and Conway stepped aside in a hallway near the West Wing entrance. We're running out of options, Harrington whispered. If he keeps pushing this, it'll dominate the news cycle for days. We can't win the comparison. Conway's voice dropped lower. Then we don't fight the comparison. We redirect. Create a new headline. Something big enough to bury this. What if he won't move on? Conway exhaled slowly. Then he'll keep punching at shadows, and Obama will keep looking untouched. Meanwhile, inside Obama's circle, aides chuckled as they scrolled through headlines. One longtime advisor leaned back in his chair and said, "We didn't even need him to show up." One statement, and Trump's already spinning in circles. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Trump had wanted to remind Americans of Obama's failures. Instead, he had reminded them of Obama's strengths. But the real twist came not in what was said behind closed doors, but in how Obama chose to handle the aftermath, quietly, strategically, and with allies stepping in to amplify his words even further. Obama didn't rush to double down after his statement. That was never his style. While Trump's team scrambled and argued in the West Wing, Obama spent the evening in his Georgetown office, quietly meeting with a handful of close advisors. The mood there couldn't have been more different. No raised voices, no frantic shuffling of papers, just a calm discussion about what had already happened and what, if anything, they should do next. One aide, a policy veteran named Carla Jennings, leaned over the polished table and said, "The numbers spoke for themselves. You don't need to say more. Let the media run with it. They've already got their story." Obama sat back, arms folded loosely, listening the way he always did, with patience. He gave people space to talk, and then, after a pause, he finally responded. "The danger," he said softly, "is that if I keep answering, I become part of the circus. He thrives on it. The more back and forth, the more noise. That's his game." Another advisor, David Liu, chuckled. "Except you didn't play his game this time. You played yours. Facts, calm perspective, and it landed harder than any insult could have." Obama nodded slightly, then looked out the window at the streetlights glowing over Georgetown. "That's the point. If the truth is strong enough, it doesn't need volume. It just needs space." Meanwhile, Obama's allies outside the room had already picked up the torch. Former cabinet members appeared on cable news shows, citing specific projects funded during his administration. Highways in Ohio, bridges in Minnesota, transit upgrades in Arizona. Each example reinforced the statement without requiring Obama himself to speak again. In Phoenix, former Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood went on a local radio station and said, "I was there. I signed off on those projects. They were real. They mattered. The facts are on the table." That clip spread fast online, giving Obama's words even more credibility. At the same time, Obama's network of younger surrogates took to social media. Former aides, grassroots organizers, and even a few celebrities tweeted graphics summarizing his accomplishments. Each one paired with the tagline, "Receipts don't shout, they prove." The phrase caught on quickly, turning into its own hashtag. In San Francisco, A non-profit leader who once worked with Obama texted a friend, "He doesn't need to lift a finger. The country's doing the talking for him." Obama himself seemed almost detached from the frenzy. That night, over dinner with Michelle and a couple of longtime friends, the conversation drifted to their daughters, future travel plans, and a new book project. Michelle teased him at one point, saying, "You know you've still got it, right? One statement and he's spiraling." Obama smiled, shook his head, and replied, "It's not about me. It's about the record. If people see it clearly, they can judge for themselves." But the reality was clear. The contrast was shaping public opinion. Even people who didn't pay much attention to politics were talking about it. In a diner in Omaha, a waitress poured coffee for two truckers discussing the story. One of them said, "Man, Obama barely says anything and suddenly he's everywhere again." His buddy shrugged. "That's what makes it work. He doesn't need to scream, he just drops the facts and walks away." Back in Washington, journalists recognized the strategy too. A piece in Politico described it this way: "Obama's silence is as strategic as his words. Every time Trump swings, Obama sidesteps, letting the weight of facts and public reaction do the heavy lifting." And that was the heart of it. Obama didn't fight for airtime, he let it come to him. His restraint became part of the story, amplifying the sense that he was steady while Trump was frantic. By Friday morning, news outlets were running editorials about leadership styles. The Boston Globe wrote, "Obama reminds us that leadership is not about decibels, but direction." Trump, in his attacks, has given Obama the chance to look presidential again without holding office. For Trump's team, it was a nightmare scenario. The more Obama stayed calm, the more his reputation grew. And the more Trump raged, the more he looked like he was losing ground. But the fire was about to spread even wider, because the media saw ratings gold in replaying this clash, and they weren't about to let it go. By the weekend, it was impossible to escape the story. Whether you were pumping gas in Reno, waiting at the airport in Orlando, or sitting in a diner in Wichita, every screen seemed locked on the same loop: Trump's fiery attack versus Obama's steady response. On CNN, the chyron read, "Trump versus Obama. Two presidencies, two styles." The panel spent 20 minutes breaking down the footage frame by frame. A body language expert pointed out how Trump leaned forward aggressively, while Obama's written words carried authority without a single raised eyebrow. "It's the difference between confrontation and conviction," the expert said. Fox News took a different approach. Their headline blared, "Obama strikes back, but is it fair?" Hosts debated whether Obama had crossed a line by even issuing a statement. "He's a former president," one guest argued. "He should stay out of the spotlight." Another countered, "But when you're attacked, you have the right to respond." And he did it with facts, not theatrics. MSNBC leaned into the contrast, running a segment titled "Receipts versus Rhetoric." Rachel Maddow told viewers, "You can dislike Obama's politics, you can critique his policies, but you cannot deny that his statement was detailed, sourced, and factual." The president's response, meanwhile, had no such foundation. Meanwhile, late night, comedy shows feasted on the material. On Saturday Night Live, the cold open featured an actor playing Trump, yelling incoherently about potholes, while Obama calmly read a children's bedtime story filled with statistics. The sketch ended with fake Obama tucking the audience in, saying, "And that's how facts work, children." The crowd erupted in laughter, but beneath the jokes, a deeper narrative was forming. Editorials across the country began asking a serious question. What does it say about the current state of American leadership when a former president outshines the sitting one with a single statement? In Dallas, the Morning News ran an editorial that read, "Obama has become Trump's shadow opponent, not because he seeks it, but because Trump keeps resurrecting him, and each time the shadow grows taller." Social media only magnified the clash. On Twitter, side-by-side video edits went viral daily. One particularly popular clip showed Trump shouting over reporters with the caption "noise," then cut to Obama's measured words with the caption "notes." That single video racked up over 12 million views in 3 days. TikTok creators joined in too. A young woman in Seattle filmed herself reacting to both clips. After Trump's rant, she covered her ears dramatically. After Obama's statement, she mouthed the words, "Finally, some sense." Her video drew thousands of comments from viewers across the political spectrum, many admitting, even reluctantly, that Obama's delivery felt more credible. In newsrooms, producers knew they had struck gold. One executive at NBC reportedly told his staff, "Run it again. People can't get enough of the contrast." And so they did, over and over. By Sunday morning, the weekly political shows were consumed with the story. On Meet the Press, Chuck Todd asked a panel of senators about the clash. A Republican from Indiana tried to defend Trump, saying, "The president is passionate about fixing America." But a Democrat from Colorado quickly replied, "Passion is fine, but passion without facts is just noise." Obama reminded us what leadership looks like. Even religious leaders weighed in. In a sermon at a church in Birmingham, a pastor referenced the clash without naming names directly. "Some shout to be heard," he said, his voice steady from the pulpit. "Others speak softly, yet their words move nations. Which kind of leader do you want to follow?" Congregants nodded in quiet agreement. For everyday Americans, the nonstop coverage began to blur into a bigger story, a tale of two men who represented two completely different versions of what it meant to be president. At a family barbecue in Mesa, Arizona, one man told his relatives, "Say what you want, but Obama talks like an adult. Trump talks like, well, Trump." His teenage niece chimed in, "And adults are supposed to be in charge." By the time Sunday night rolled around, the consensus in much of the country was hard to ignore. Trump had tried to frame Obama as a failure, but the more the media replayed the side-by-side clips, the more Obama looked like the adult in the room. But the most telling shift wasn't just in the headlines. It was in the quiet ways ordinary Americans started voicing where their trust now leaned. By Monday morning, the media storm had settled into something far more impactful, a shift in how ordinary Americans were talking about leadership. Pollsters noticed it first. A quick-turn survey conducted by a research firm in Columbus, Ohio, showed that nearly 62% of respondents felt Obama's statement came across as more presidential than Trump's press conference. The firm's director said bluntly, "That number includes independents and even some Republicans." The contrast hit harder than expected, but the numbers only told part of the story. The real impact showed up in coffee shops, factory floors, classrooms, and backyards across the country. In a diner outside Topeka, Kansas, two farmers discussed the news over scrambled eggs and black coffee. "I'm no Obama fan," one said, adjusting his cap, "but I gotta admit he laid it out cleaner than Trump did. Trump's always yelling. Obama just explained." His friend frowned but didn't disagree. "Facts are facts," he muttered. In Detroit, at a small auto parts plant, workers gathered around a break-room TV as the clips replayed for the 100th time. One woman, wiping grease from her hands, shook her head. "You can't argue with numbers. I don't care who you vote for. He had the data. And Trump didn't." Her coworker added, "And when you're building cars, you want data, not shouting." The group chuckled, but the point was clear. Even high school students were weighing in. In Fresno, California, a civics teacher asked her class what they thought about the clash. A sophomore raised her hand and said, "Trump sounded mad. Obama sounded smart. If you're trying to convince people, smart wins." Another student leaned back and said, "Yeah, one sounded like a president, the other like a reality show." Laughter rippled across the room, but the remarks stuck. The ripple carried into community centers and barbershops, where conversations took on a tone of reflection. In a church basement in Indianapolis, volunteers packing food boxes discussed the clips between tasks. One man summed it up. "Shouting only works for so long. At some point, you've got to show what you've done." Obama showed receipts. Trump didn't. Social media mirrored the sentiment. On Facebook, posts from everyday users spread faster than pundit commentary. A grandmother in Oklahoma wrote, "I don't usually post about politics, but watching Obama respond reminded me of when leaders cared about details." Her post drew hundreds of supportive comments from friends and neighbors. On Instagram, college students shared side-by-side memes with captions like, "Guess which one looks like a leader?" Polls reinforced the anecdotal evidence. By Tuesday, a nationwide survey from Pew Research showed that trust in Trump's handling of infrastructure had dipped by 8 points, while confidence in Obama's legacy on the issue had climbed by nearly 10. For a former president to outshine a sitting one in current polling was rare, and it rattled the White House. Meanwhile, comedians and late-night hosts weren't the only ones amplifying the moment. Community leaders used it as a teaching example. In Charlotte, North Carolina, a youth basketball coach paused practice to talk to his players about composure. "Look," he said, holding up his phone with the clips, "this is what I mean when I tell you don't let emotions run the game. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and you'll win, just like Obama did here." The teenagers nodded, making the connection. Immediately, even some Trump supporters admitted privately that the moment didn't play well. At a truck stop in Oklahoma City, a man in a red cap told a reporter off the record, "I like Trump. I voted for him. But he shouldn't keep going after Obama. Makes him look small. Obama's not even in office anymore." For many, that was the heart of the matter. The more Trump attacked, the more Obama's restraint seemed presidential, and the more Obama stayed quiet after his statement, the louder his message seemed to echo. By midweek, commentators began calling it a clapback heard around the country, not because it was fiery or insulting, but because it exposed something people had been feeling but hadn't yet voiced out loud. That calm leadership was sorely missing. But as the public leaned toward Obama's side, Trump couldn't resist doubling down, setting the stage for a misstep that would only make things worse. By Wednesday afternoon, it was clear that Trump couldn't let it go. The White House press team tried urging him to move on, to pivot toward a scheduled event in Pittsburgh about manufacturing jobs. But Trump saw the headlines, the polls, the memes, and he hated the idea of Obama getting the last word. He insisted on responding directly, forcefully, and on camera. So when the press pool gathered in the Rose Garden later that day, reporters braced themselves. They knew what was coming. Trump approached the podium, gripping his notes but barely glancing at them. His jaw was tight, his voice already elevated. "Barack Obama," he began. "He's out there acting like he accomplished something great. He didn't. He failed this country. Everybody knows it." The reporters leaned in. Trump was already heated. Instead of talking about job growth, he launched straight into a tirade. He talks about bridges and roads. We're the ones actually building. His administration, nothing but words. Lots of talking, no action. "I've done more in 3 years than he did in 8. People tell me this all the time." Then came the part that would haunt him. Trump, without realizing it, misstated a key fact. He claimed that not a single major highway project started under Obama had been completed, a claim that was flatly untrue. Within minutes, fact-checkers from the Associated Press and Reuters were already tweeting examples of completed projects. The rebuilding of I-35 in Minnesota, the expansion of US 93 in Nevada, the modernization of Amtrak lines across the Northeast Corridor. The press corps smelled blood. One reporter shouted, "Mr. President, are you aware of the Recovery Act-funded projects completed in 2011 and 2012? Trump waved dismissively. "Fake news, totally fake. They're lying. Everybody knows it." But the footage told a different story. By the time the clip aired on evening broadcasts, networks were already rolling B-roll footage of those exact projects. Gleaming bridges, widened highways, ribbon-cutting ceremonies where Obama had once stood with governors and mayors. The juxtaposition was brutal. On MSNBC, a Chiron blared, "Trump denies bridges Americans drive on every day." On CBS, Norah O'Donnell calmly stated, "The president's claim simply doesn't match the facts." She introduced a segment showing residents in Nevada driving on a highway expanded under Obama. A man behind the wheel laughed into the camera, "So I guess this road doesn't exist?" Meanwhile, late-night TV pounced again. Trevor Noah joked. Trump said Obama never finished a highway project, which is weird, because I'm pretty sure I drove on one yesterday. The audience roared, but what stung more than comedy was the quiet acknowledgement from everyday people. In Des Moines, a small business owner shook his head while watching the clip. You can argue politics all day, but you can't argue with the road under your tires. That's real. That's proof. Inside the White House, staffers buried their heads in their hands. Harrington, the press secretary, muttered to an aide, "We begged him not to go there." Another staffer groaned. Now it's Obama's word against actual asphalt. The backlash snowballed. Twitter lit up with the hashtag #TheRoadExists, and soon people were posting pictures of highways, overpasses, and train stations with captions like, "Built under Obama. I guess we're imagining it." Even celebrities joined in, amplifying the joke. Thursday morning, the damage was clear. Editorials across the country blasted Trump for picking a fight with reality. USA Today wrote, "Presidents can argue opinions. They cannot erase concrete." The Boston Globe put it more bluntly. Trump swung at Obama and hit a bridge instead. Obama, true to form, stayed silent. He didn't need to say a word. His allies didn't either. The facts and the images of real infrastructure projects spoke louder than anything he could have written, and the silence itself became a strategy. Cable news anchors noted, Obama doesn't even need to respond. His work, visible across the country, is doing the talking for him. For Trump, it was the worst outcome, not just being contradicted by Obama, but by the lived experience of millions of Americans. Every highway driven, every bridge crossed, became a reminder of the truth he tried to deny. But the real weight of the moment came in the days after, when people began reflecting not just on the clash itself, but on what it said about leadership, truth, and the kind of voices the nation wanted to trust. By the end of that week, the story had grown beyond a simple clash between two presidents. It wasn't just about infrastructure or even partisan politics anymore. It had become a mirror showing Americans two starkly different ways of leading and forcing them to think about which they valued more. On one side was Donald Trump, loud, combative, unwilling to back down even when the facts stood against him. On the other was Barack Obama, measured, careful, letting evidence and calm delivery do the work. For millions of people, that contrast wasn't just interesting, it was clarifying. In East Philadelphia, a father driving his kids to school heard a radio segment replaying both clips. After a moment of silence, his 10-year-old son asked, "Dad, why does one guy sound mad and the other sound like a teacher?" The father smiled sadly. "That's the difference, son. One's trying to win an argument, the other's trying to explain." In Cy, a small town in Iowa, a group of retirees met at their weekly breakfast spot. Between bites of pancakes, they debated what they had seen. One man, a lifelong Republican, admitted, "I don't agree with Obama on a lot, but you can't deny the guy makes sense. He doesn't lose his cool. That's what sticks with people." Another added, "And maybe that's what leadership should be. Calm. In the storm, not adding to it." Newspapers framed it the same way. The Los Angeles Times editorial board wrote, "Leadership is not measured by the volume of one's voice, but by the weight of one's words." In this exchange, Obama proved that truth delivered without anger still resonates. The Miami Herald went further. Trump tried to drag Obama into the mud, but Obama stayed on higher ground, and from there, his words carried farther. The lesson reached beyond politics. Coaches, teachers, even pastors used it as an example of composure versus chaos. In a classroom in Denver, a teacher told her students, "You can shout your way through a test, but it won't get you the answers. Calm thinking will." At a church in Nashville, a minister closed his sermon with, "Let us remember, the loudest voice is not always the wisest." Sometimes the truth is soft, steady, and undeniable. Even online, where shouting often wins, Obama's calm approach proved the opposite. A YouTube commentator summed it up in a video that went viral. "Trump gave us fire. Obama gave us water. Guess which one put the other out?" But perhaps the most telling sign of the shift came in the polls. By Friday, Gallup released numbers showing that 58% of Americans thought Obama had handled himself more presidentially during the clash, compared to just 34% for Trump. For a sitting president to lose that kind of perception battle to a predecessor was rare and telling. Inside the White House, aides tried to spin the story but privately admitted they'd taken a hit. One insider told a reporter anonymously, "He walked right into it, and Obama barely had to lift a finger." And that was the final irony. Trump had set out to paint Obama as a failure. Instead, he reminded the country of Obama's strengths, his patience, his attention to detail, his ability to stay cool under pressure. The attack backfired, and in the process, Trump revealed more about his own flaws than Obama's. For Obama, the takeaway was simple. Let the truth do the heavy lifting. For Trump, it was a reminder that pride and stubbornness can turn even a small jab into a self-inflicted wound. And for America, it was a lesson about leadership, that calm beats chaos and facts outlast fury. In living rooms across the country, people reflected on that. They might not remember every statistic Obama cited or every word Trump shouted, but they remembered the feeling. One voice left them anxious, the other left them thinking. And that ultimately is the kind of leadership people crave, not the kind that shouts the loudest, but the kind that stands the tallest. So if there's one lesson to take from this clash, it's this. Truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. It just needs to stand firm. If you agree that calm leadership matters and that facts should always outweigh noise, make sure to subscribe, because these stories remind us not just of politics, but of what it means to lead with clarity in a world full of chaos.